Missiles light up skies amid the Iranian strikes and Israeli attacks near nuclear sites. Israeli strikes on Gaza kill at least 53 and wound over 100. And NATO leaders set to agree 5% defense spending target at upcoming Hague summit. Good afternoon, welcome to Q News. I'm Mark Summers. France is taking steps to evacuate its citizens from Israel and Iran following a week of cross-border strikes between the two countries. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot says convoys will be arranged to help French nationals leave Iran by land, heading toward Turkey or Armenia to access international airports. In Israel, buses will transport citizens to Jordan starting Friday morning, with a charter flight from Amman planned by the end of the week. The operation targets those in urgent or vulnerable situations. Iraq has dispatched its first convoy of humanitarian aid from Basra to Iran. That's amid growing relief efforts following the recent regional escalations. 4 trucks loaded with emergency medical supplies left Basra today, heading to Iran through the border crossing. The shipment includes painkillers, antibiotics, and critical surgical tools. The aid was donated by pharmaceutical firms and commercial warehouses in coordination with the Basra Health Authority and local government. This marks the first Iraqi aid convoy to support Iran in its current crisis. Iranian state TV has aired footage claiming its defense systems shot down an Israeli drone as cross-border strikes escalate. The video shows what Iran says is an Israeli drone targeted by its air defenses, but Reuters has not verified the footage or confirmed when and where it was filmed. Since June 13th, Iran has launched around 400 missiles at Israel, with 40 breaching Israeli defenses and killing 24 civilians. That's according to Israeli officials. Iran reports at least 224 dead in the Israeli strikes, mostly civilians, though no new figures have been issued in many days. As tensions with Israel intensify, growing numbers of Iranians are crossing into Armenia through the Megri border. Eyewitnesses report hundreds of Iranians arriving in southern Armenia since Wednesday, many carrying heavy luggage and seeking temporary shelter. With Iran's airspace shut down, Armenia has become a key transit route for both Iranian citizens and foreign nationals. The border town of Megri is now overwhelmed, with hotels nearing full capacity. Azerbaijan is also receiving increased arrivals. Officials say over 700 foreign residents in Iran have entered Armenia and Azerbaijan since Tuesday. Missiles lit up skies over Israel and the West Bank early today, following a new Iranian strike and reported Israeli attacks near Iran's nuclear facilities. The Israeli military and Iranian state media reported another round of missile exchanges overnight. Air raid sirens were heard in Jerusalem, while footage from Bethlehem and Haifa showed missiles streaking through the sky. Israeli outlets confirmed at least 4 impact sites. Hours earlier, Israeli missiles reportedly struck near Iran's Kondab heavy water reactor, a key nuclear site. That's according to Iranian media. The cross-border escalation shows no signs of slowing. Now, for more on this, we cross over to our newsroom. Rehan Morsi is there for us. Rehan.
Thank you, Mark. To help us analyse the situation, we're joined from Cairo by the editor-in-chief of Al Akhbar newspaper, Mr. Osama Saeed. Welcome, sir, to Qnews. Firstly, sir, let's start off by asking, Iran's airspace has been shut and Armenians reporting border pressure, while Americans are reporting border pressure. How prepared are the neighbouring countries to absorb a potential wave of regional displacement or cross-border movement?
Of course, the neighboring countries to Iran are in a very bad position, not only for the expectations of displacement waves after the US warnings and the Israeli strikes, but also a lot of neighboring regions to Iran might be actually threatened and exposed to the risk of being struck. Of course, the neighboring countries have already enough problems and internal challenges that might minimize its abilities to receive refugees or displaced civilians. The entire region is witnessing such strikes. We have seen what happened in Syria and also what happened in Sudan and different other regions. So apparently the infrastructure or the qualified structure to receive any displaced are extremely exhausted in the light of the ongoing attacks. So there might be no capacity to receive the displaced. This war has to be seized to avoid this unknown fate and this very difficult situation that will be created due to the ongoing strikes.
Well, sir, as you said, the situation right now is quite difficult, and Iraq is currently delivering humanitarian aid to Iran. How does this affect Iraq's regional positioning, especially that it has ties with both Iran and Western countries?
Of course, Iraq is in a very difficult position because they have strong relations with Iran, as Iran has a strong influence on the armed and political powers inside Iraq. And in the meantime, Iraq also wants to isolate itself from the rising crises in the region. They do not want to be engaged in the conflict because engaging in such conflict will lead to more internal challenges. But unfortunately, their position or location geographically puts it in the crossfire between Iran and Israel. So anyway, Iraq is facing this crisis with a lot of challenges, and I think that the political dialogue so far by the Iraqi government is trying to take itself away from taking a direct bias to one of both parties. To my estimate, there are different belongings and affiliations to Iraqi factions to the Iranian philosophy and the Iranian politics, which will be a lot of pressure on Iraq. In addition, the United States is also still influencing the Iraqi decision and the Iraqi internal. So Iraq seems to be one of the most influenced and impacted countries with these strikes.
Well, sir, could you also tell us more about the legal and strategic implications of the reported Israeli strikes in and around the Iranian nuclear sites, given the current tit-for-tat escalations that are happening between both countries?
Definitely, it's a huge threat and it's a violation of most of the international laws and standards related to protecting civilians and protecting sites that might be targeted for nuclear purposes. Targeting the nuclear Iranian sites will not be only limited to these sites, but they will lead to radiology and a lot of other neighboring countries can be impacted, and this will also harm a lot of civilians. This is a blatant violation of international law, especially that there has been no procedures whatsoever to provide the containment standards to contain these emissions or to minimize the impacts, especially with the ongoing strikes and attacks and the high frequency of these strikes. This will not leave no space for the relevant authorities, whether international or national, to take the necessary precautions to contain any emissions, or at least contain the neighboring regions. I think with the expansion of the military operations and with the increasing frequency of strikes in the confrontation between Iran and Israel, I imagine that Israel might actually resort to targeting more the nuclear reactors, which is a very serious threat to the Gulf region and to the Arab shores. These impacts due to the Israeli strikes might actually extend to include Arab and neighboring countries to Iran.
Well, sir, as you said, the frequency of the missile exchange is quite high, and civilian casualty as well is quite high. What role, realistically speaking, can the international bodies like the UN or the EU, for instance, play to de-escalate the current situation or try to stop what's happening right now?
There is a difference between what should be done by these institutions, which is preserve peace and security, and calling for avoiding military options to resolve conflicts between countries. And this is what must be done by these institutions in the framework of their roles and responsibilities stipulated by the UN charters and international laws. But in reality, these institutions are not carrying out their due roles, and they do not have an effective role to de-escalate the situation. The entire case is pending the US and Israeli decisions, and both countries are supporting the military actions and operations to resolve problems with Iran. We had hoped for the international community to play a bigger role in making the negotiations succeed regarding the nuclear program, but things went to the confrontation and escalation path. I think the international community has a lot of responsibility to contain the Israeli arrogance and to stop the Israeli endeavors to use force to settle its disagreements with the neighboring countries. Now Israel is destabilizing the entire region, occupying Syrian lands, bombed Lebanon and Yemen, in addition to its genocidal practices in the Gaza Strip. And now they are opening new front with Iran. The international community must pressure Israel and put it back on track to commit to international laws and standards. Unfortunately, so far, Israel is representing an arrogant state above the law, and the United States is providing cover and support and providing diplomatic cover that supports Israel to go without punishment, evading all of these crimes they are committing against civilians in different states.
Okay, that was the editor-in-chief of Al-Akhbar newspaper, Mr. Osama Saeed. Thank you so much for joining us here on Q News. And now we go back to you, Mark, in our studio.
Many thanks, Raham. Raham Morsi there in our newsroom. Now, Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir visited Soroka Hospital after it was struck by an Iranian missile, warning of more destruction ahead. Ben-Gvir toured the damaged Soroka Medical Center following an Iranian missile strike amid the escalating hostilities. At the site, he invoked Hiroshima and Nagasaki underscoring what he called the existential threat of Iran's nuclear ambitions. He framed the conflict as a fight for the safety of future generations. The visit comes as Israeli cities remain on high alert and tensions with Iran continue to intensify. US President Donald Trump says military intervention in the Israel-Iran conflict is on the table, though no action has been confirmed. Trump has expressed strong backing for Israeli strike on Iran, but has not committed US forces to the campaign. Reports indicate he has approved a military plan targeting Iran, but is delaying its execution to increase pressure on Tehran to halt its nuclear program. The statement comes amid growing speculation over possible US involvement in the escalating regional conflict. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin and China's Xi Jinping have condemned Israel's attacks on Iran, urging immediate de-escalation and a return to diplomacy. In a joint statement, Putin and Xi accused Israel of violating the UN Charter and international law amid its ongoing strikes on Iran. Putin renewed Russia's offer to mediate, a move backed by Xi, though no side has responded. A Kremlin aide said the leaders believe only political and diplomatic solutions can resolve the crisis. Both nations pledged to stay in close coordination as the tensions continue to rise. China has evacuated more than 1,600 citizens from Iran and hundreds more from Israel as regional conflict continues to escalate. Beijing confirmed the safe evacuation of its nationals from both Iran and Israel, with coordination underway involving multiple regional players, including Oman. Chinese officials emphasized the need for de-escalation and urged major powers to act responsibly. The Foreign Ministry condemned violations of international law and called for immediate dialogue and a ceasefire to avoid further instability or humanitarian fallout. Russia has called on Israel to immediately halt airstrikes near Iran's Bushehr nuclear plant, where Russian specialists are stationed. The Russian Foreign Ministry issued a warning today urging Israel to stop targeting the nuclear facility in Iran. The plant, which is fueled by Russian-supplied nuclear material, is operated with Russian technical assistance. Moscow emphasized that spent fuel is returned to Russia to minimize proliferation risks. The statement reflects growing concern over regional escalation and the potential threat to critical nuclear infrastructure.
Жесткая и непримиримая реакция стран мирового большинства на израильские удары по территории Ирана, включая ядерно-энергетическую инфраструктуру.
Now to Gaza. Israeli strikes on Gaza since early today have left at least 53 Palestinians dead and over 100 wounded, that's according to local sources. Palestinian sources report that 22 people were killed and dozens injured when Israeli drones and ground vehicles targeted Palestinians waiting for aid near the Netzarim corridor in central Gaza. The total death toll from Israeli attacks since the strip, across the strip since dawn has risen to 53, with more than 100 others wounded. The strikes come amid ongoing bombardment and worsening humanitarian crisis. Graphic footage from Gaza shows casualties being rushed into Al-Shifa hospital after an Israeli airstrike reportedly hit tents sheltering displaced Palestinians in Gaza City. According to Gaza's health ministry, the strike targeted an area near Al-Susi Mosque in Al-Shati refugee camp, where displaced families had gathered. Heart-wrenching scenes at Al-Shifa Hospital showed wounded children and grieving relatives. One woman said her niece and sister were missing. Another mother, whose 2 sons were killed, blamed Israel and the United States for their deaths. The hospital is overwhelmed, with patients treated on the floor as more casualties continue to arrive. In Gaza, mothers are walking for hours under threat of gunfire, desperately searching for food to feed their children as aid remains scarce. With limited humanitarian assistance reaching many areas, Gazan mothers say they risk violence and uncertainty each time they leave shelter. Many are forced to sleep on the ground near aid distribution points, hoping for a chance at basic supplies. The emotional toll is rising, with reports of children crying from hunger and families going days without anything to eat. The worsening conditions underscore the deepening humanitarian crisis. U.S. Special Envoy for Syria and Ambassador to Turkey, Thomas Barak, has made his first official visit to Lebanon. Thomas Barak met with Lebanese President Joseph Aoun in Beirut today as part of his first diplomatic mission to the country. The visit comes as Israel and Iran continue trading strikes and as Washington maintains pressure on Lebanon to disarm Hezbollah. Barak, a longtime advisor to President Trump and private equity executive, was named envoy to Syria last month while serving as U.S. ambassador to Turkey. NATO leaders are expected to agree on a 5% defence spending target at their upcoming summit in The Hague, marking a major shift in alliance policy. Analysts say the key outcome of Wednesday's NATO summit will be the adoption of a new 5% defence spending goal. The move is seen as a diplomatic win for US President Trump, who has long pushed allies to spend more. The updated target includes 3.5% of GDP for traditional military spending and an additional 1.5% for infrastructure and cyber defence. The Hague meeting underscores growing concerns over global security threats. Thousands remain displaced in Indonesia following Mount Loatobi Laki-Laki's latest eruption, with reports of insufficient aid at temporary shelters. Villagers forced to flee the volcano's danger zone in East Nusa Tenggara are facing worsening conditions in makeshift shelters. Despite being outside the hazard area, residents report severe shortages in food supplies, especially rice. Many are returning to their homes, damaged to cook and transport food back to camps. The displaced are also dealing with job losses and school disruptions. Indonesia's volcanology agency says the volcano has erupted 427 times this year, with Tuesday's blast marking the strongest since last November. Severe flooding struck parts of southwest China's Chongqing municipality overnight, disrupting traffic and sweeping away vehicles in hard-hit townships. Torrential rain in the county triggered flash floods late Wednesday. Footage from Gaiakao village showed submerged streets and cars being carried off by flood waters. Ditang town recorded over 304 millimeters of rain in just hours, sending river levels well above the danger mark. Authorities say road collapses and slope failures have cut off transport areas in several areas. Emergency efforts are underway. And that's our main bulletin for this afternoon, but just a chance to recap the main headlines today. Missiles light up skies amid the Iranian strikes and Israeli attacks on nuclear sites. Israeli strikes on Gaza kill at least 53 and wound over 100. And NATO leaders set to agree on 5% defense spending target at upcoming Hague summit. That's all for our bulletin for this hour, but don't forget you can follow Q News on our social media platforms. At Qnews EGY is where you will find us. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more updates here on Q News. In Depth is next.